Chapter 3. Born Again. Soon after I arrived in Australia, I was introduced by my cousin to a couple who were expecting their first baby. A beautiful young couple who knew my cousin through the surfing community, and they wanted a home birth. I had already been proclaimed as being someone who could facilitate this for them, as I was attending home births in the UK as part of a caseload. Of course, I was delighted to be considered for something that was so well catered for by the English maternity care system, but I was a little taken aback when I discovered the lack of support and consideration for this in Australia. I was further concerned as the couple were already 8.5 months into their personal parenting journey. I met Saffron and Jonah at a coffee shop. They were a beautiful couple, a poster advert for Bohemia, sumptuously clean, fresh and bright. Crochet crop-topped and hemp fishing panted youthfulness that greeted with hugs and warm touches, gentle soft words, and I was hooked on the idea of being their midwife. Saffron was a pearlescent rose-budded Caucasian that wore a tan of summer beach exposure, and Jonah had Malaysian and Sri Lankan influenced colour. Jonah was petite in comparison to the tall, statuesque figure of his partner. There was much to discuss and share, as we had not followed the usual routine that I had become accustomed to in my experience of home birth in the UK. They instructed me as to their antenatal care that they had received from the local hospital and their GP, and their uncomplicated path was reassuring to me, as was their countenance. They were wide-eyed, excited, and full of openness to the situation and suggestions for their consideration. They embraced the opportunity to birth at Saffron's home, a home that she had shared with her mother and 4 siblings of descending age. They were beyond excitement and enthusiasm. They were expectant of their joy, their commitment and responsibility, and it was infectious. When booking home births, it had become customary and essential to expose couples to potential complications, risks, and other cautionary information to ensure that their decision to have a baby at home was truly an informed one, and not simply a blinkered, ignorant whim. Contrary to the common publicised view of home birthing couples, it is a calculation, a consideration, and an acceptance of risk against benefit that is a factor of all births, irrespective of the location, plan or method. The lateness in this pregnancy necessitated an uncustomary concentrated barrage of cautionary information and contingencies. Saffron and Jonah glanced at each other with each potential complication, smiled, squeezed hands in reassuring unison, and nodded in acceptance. The past medical history taken was uncomplicated. The pregnancy had been without any unusual concern, and Saffron was a specimen of well-being. I visited Saffron at home on 2 or 3 more occasions before attending her birth, and was infused by the energy and the vibrancy of her whole family. Saffron's mum was as vibrant as her eldest daughter, and Saffron's 3 sisters and brother oozed with infectious, enthusiastic energy. The house was a rustic, beachcombers surf cottage, which reinforced the distinct differences from homes I had known and experienced in England. This cultural immersion was acutely felt the night of Saffron's labour. I received Saffron's call while stargazing as I walked through the hospital's car park after finishing a late shift. It was a crisp, glass-etched night and stirred feelings of elemental oneness. The call was framed beautifully within this context. The night's magic continued to cast an ethereal feeling over me throughout the journey, through the cane fields to the beachside house. It concentrated the familiar anticipation and excited feelings that a call to a birth inevitably generates. As Knuckle hit the wood door, it opened briskly with excited children's chorus accompaniment as Saf's sisters and brother led me in. She was upstairs in the back bedroom, the sisters' room, a room I had not seen in my preconceived view. The bunk beds had eclipsed it from my pre-play view of the birthing scenario. Yet the scene that greeted me reassured me to its appropriateness. Saffron was in the arms of a serene, beautiful, siren-like woman who was stroking her hair and moving her head as if it was in a trance-like state. She hummed into her ear as she stroked. She glanced at me and smiled. Jonah was resting at Saffron's feet. He had his back up against the bunk bed, knees raised, and his eyes were fixed on Saffron. They were all in the far side of the room, under the only window. The curtains were open and the night framed the scene. A hushed series of hellos were followed, after a respectful pause in time to the inevitable, "How are you?" Saffron, who had not opened her own eyes to say hello at this point, looked up at me as I kneeled to the side of her and said, "I'm fine, but it really hurts." I was getting a little caught up in the pain. With this she squeezed the supportive siren's hand and said, "But Shana talked me through it, and I'm feeling calmer now. I remembered what you said when we talked about not letting fear amplify itself through the pain, and Shana's touch, voice, and that thought has got me here. It's getting hard again now though." I replied with glowing affirmation on her strengths, her abilities, and how she was obviously lovingly and attentively supported by her chosen birth support partners. The conversation in softened, hushed tones continued through the punctuating contractions, which were approximately 3 minutes apart and lasted about 45 seconds. The 2-minute snippets enabled enquiries as to what had preceded my arrival, times and events, etc., and to the things I would like to engage in and monitor. There is a fine balance between observation, monitoring, and not disturbing the ambience of natural flow of birthing proceedings, which a midwife must walk. As a contraction faded, I ushered the whispered mantra, "I'm just going to listen to the baby." The fetal heart bounded its strong, percussive song, and Saffron took a deep breath and said, "There you are." Shana sniffed, and I remember being taken aback that she had a tear flowing from her eye and had an appearance of a reassured release. The emotion of the unfolding birth was enveloping us all. The magic of the night, of the stars, and gathered collective were fulfilling a moment of our own epic recounted tale. Palpations, auscultations, reassurances, and gentle touches eventually gave way to a crescendo of energetic expressions of pressure, movement, and intensity. Of course, the rising energies of the rhythmical contractions had already seen the preparation and checking of my resuscitation equipment, opening my birthing pack, unobserved by Saffron and her immediate attendants as it was, a cult in the shadows. Saffron eventually called out, "Oh, I need to push. I think she's coming." It is common that fear and a cognitive understanding of the birth process encourages women to want to push early. It is often early pushing on a cervix that hasn't fully dilated is a cause of many birthing problems, such as swollen cervix and a poorly positioned baby. On many occasions this can be contributed to by impatient, over-enthusiastic or fearful attendants, including the midwives. Depending on the woman, her countenance and presence, there may be a need to confirm that full dilation has occurred. This would be attended by securing permission for a vaginal examination or to assess the woman's need to actually push or react to the pressure feelings. Push if you have to. Hold off for now if you can. Breathe. It's not an uncommon choice of words in these instances. There are no hard rules, but organic fluid decisions based on context, experiences, position and personality. In Saffron's instance of composure, lack of panic and progressive journey, I was comfortable with not confirming full dilation, but chose to ask her to be self-aware and mindful of her abilities, and only push if she had to. I called Julie, a midwife at the hospital that had offered to support me as my second midwife to attend, as birth was surely not far away. As another contraction came, there was intensity, but again composure. The fetal heart reassured as it constantly did, but there was a subtle difference in Saffron. She was silent. Her facial expression became pinched, and a contraction out of sync was accompanied by a deep guttural groan. Involuntary pushing, no panic, no fear, just the enormous energy and power of a woman's body responding instinctively and unadulteratedly. Typically, in a first-time mother-to-be, there is a period of slow progression before any visual pronouncement of the emergence of the baby, but Saffron pushed, and the baby's head already caused the lips of her vagina to gape at the height of the contraction. 2 or more contractions saw the vagina talk to us more and pronounced that the baby was coming without any hesitation or difficulty. The auscultations reassured with each contraction, and was in hushed whisper fed back to Saffron's focused self. Her eyes closed, fully prepared, composed and poised. Excitement was an undercurrent, amplified anticipation seen by rapid glances between Jonah, the siren and myself, but also the arrival of Saf's mother into the half-open doorway behind me. Glancing as she was on the verge of another world, a world of candlelight, oils and creative rhythm as her granddaughter was on the verge of new life. 2 or more contractions and she was on the verge of crowning. Saffron instinctively adjusted her position, and the shadow-like scaffold of the siren facilitated this by her own adjustments. Jonah came closer to me, and his attention of Saffron now honed in on the pinnacle of this moment. The head eased past, the expulsive kiss, and sat but for a short moment. This coupled contraction was more than the announcement, but was the arrival itself. As my hands moved to the cradle the head, they met Jonah's hands instinctively moving to greet his daughter, and they backed away just slightly so as to allow his hands to encourage this greeting. A nod from myself, and the endeavour was seamlessly undertaken. As the daughter came into his hands, he sniffed as tears began to fall. His hands, in turn, were met by Saffron's, whose eyes were open and was reaching to greet her own daughter. This united parental embrace saw the emergence of a lively baby brought to her mother's waiting chest. The siren sang a song of emotional release, a volcanic explosion of inner, passionate energy. Saffron was calm, her energies were spent searching for features, breathing, to know. But as she glanced toward Jonah, his emotion now unbridled and his sobbing, she crumpled her chin into a tearful joy. Saf's mum cried behind me, and a chorus of tears and sobs greeted the new family member. As the new grandmother moved closer to the new family member, a second wave of emotion was heralded by a breaking wave of release in this domestic beach house. As this all unfolded, I was directed by something unexpected and never encountered before. The sound of harmonious guitars gently pervaded the air, wafting in with the household's well wishes. Voices began to accompany the music. The song was unfamiliar, but it was joyous and was easy to identify its purpose as a greeting to the new life that I had just had the privilege of witnessing. It was a welcome from her uncle and aunties, her friends for life, no doubt. Since the years have veiled some aspects of this event, it was in this guitar greeting that resonates most acutely for me, so unique and so perfect. I was to discover on visits that followed the birth it was indeed Saffron's brother and sister sharing their congratulations and joy through a Christian song that was familiar and much loved by all of the family members. The song continued to play as my practical care saw me intrude into the family circle, ease the placental birth, formalise the end of the overviewing neonatal assessment and new mother's overall well-being before I withdrew into the hall and past the musical emanating room. As I went past the room, I heard a creak of a door that transformed into footsteps charging up the hall toward the birthing room, just as I commenced my descent down to the stairs. As I got into the kitchen, there was another celebrational wave from the birthing room that I had left. I was greeted by Julie, seated at the large wooden kitchen table. She was sipping from a mug, but managing to smile a knowing, accomplished smile over its brim. As the mug returned to the table, she understatedly and oh so perfectly asked if I wanted a tea. I've done a plate of toast, and there is jam, peanut butter and some biscuits I found in the pantry for you to take up if you want. The story of midwives is so undertold, but the unspoken words between those midwives who immerse themselves in the role is another form of magic that was experienced that night. Julie and I sat there for a few minutes before any solicitation of recount or inquiry was uttered at all. Instead, we held on the essence of the night by listening to the sounds upstairs, still bestowed privilege that few outside of the family ever share. Julie left some time after my return upstairs. She left a note which simply read, "Well done." She left it on the kitchen table next to the notes I had commenced, now fresh with the addition of her witnessing time of birth. She would have dutifully left after my check of Saffron, and the baby confirmed no cause for concern or overt involvement. I left that night myself, fading into the background after completing paperwork and several checks and observations. I left after only saying farewell to Shana having come downstairs, allowing the family to close into a warmer and more intimate embrace. I asked Shana to say bye to everyone, and that I would see them tomorrow late morning unless they needed me for anything beforehand. Shana hugged me and cried again, uttering thank you. That was so beautiful. And as I faded into the mystical night, that was my sentiments exactly, just quite simply beautiful. I saw Saffron and her family over the next few days, celebrated the continuance of her maternal confidence and accomplishments, monitored her well-being and ease of feeding and recuperation. There were no tears to heal, no problems to voice, and no concerns to detract. On my final visit there was a morning tea laid on, and I was treated like I was an honourable member of their family. Saffron's mum placed into my hand a book as a gift to do with the dawning of a Neo-Zion, which I saw as a conclusion of our theological discussion and her desire to rescue me from the absence of my perception of God. I received it warmly, and we embraced. We started a chain of hugs and cuddles, cards and drawings from the siblings, and a long meaningful farewell and expression of mutual gratitude between Jonah, Saf and myself. The overall feeling was reminiscent of a family member travelling for a protracted period overseas, both joy and sadness. In a few years that passed, I have kept in contact with this beautiful family and thank them every day in my heart for enriching my arrival in a new strange country, born again in a new world.